From Built It Productions, it's The Great Creators. Conversations about creativity with some of the most celebrated actors, musicians, and performers of our time. I'm Guy Raz, and on the show today, Amelia Meath and Nick Sanborn from the indie pop band Sylvan Esso.
We'll get in the studio and Nick will start improvising and then I'll respond to what he's doing.
Sometimes we'll get excited about a voice memo one of us took somewhere. It's anything from a literal just sound that the dog made all the way up to Amelia writing a complete song.
Sylvan Esso's very first record reached the top 40 on the Billboard charts, and since then, they played Coachella, Lollapalooza, and other huge stages around the world. In this past year, they celebrated their 10th year together as a band and as a couple with an anniversary edition of their first self-titled album. So today on the show, how Nick and Amelia met through a remix, fell in love, and then created their signature electro-pop sound. Plus, why they compare their songwriting process to fishing and what it's been like to build their own record label in their adopted hometown of Durham, North Carolina. That's all coming up after this break. Amelia, I want to start with you. I know you grew up in Massachusetts, in Cambridge. And I think for both of you, your dads had a pretty big impact on or influence on music and just exposing you to interesting music. Amelia, can you talk a little bit about you and your dad and buying music and listening to music and what you listened to?
We had an ancient giant maroon Mazda and it was the age of tapes. So we would go to Strawberries and get tapes in Cambridge, Massachusetts to listen to on our various drives. And any tape that we bought kind of just lived in between the seats. So we grew a small mountain of tapes that we would pick from whenever we were going to school, whenever he was driving me to school. And they included a lot of Foreigner, Nick Lowe, and Al Green, and Bonnie Raitt, and NRBQ.
Nice.
A lot of Massachusetts bands.
Yeah. And how about you, Nick? I know you grew up in Milwaukee. And tell me about your kind of early exposure to music.
My dad's a musician. He plays a lot of different instruments, but mainly kind of guitar and mandolin. So it was just kind of always a thing in our house. I really remember even when I was a little kid, he used to play musical games with me where he would be playing guitar and he would make me point at him right before the chords were about to change, which I just now, looking back on it, feels like a really wild way to teach somebody how music is working. Or he was getting me to, he really liked the playing stuff that you anticipate or understand what was happening and how music worked. And so that was just always a part of it. And then, I joined the orchestra. I was lucky enough to be in a public school where they still had a music program. And
you played guitar?
Yeah, later on. I still kind of played guitar okay. I'm not a great guitar player or anything.
What was your instrument?
Saxophone. And then bass. When we got to be able to play in jazz band, I started playing upright bass.
Oh, wow.
And that's still probably my main instrument is bass. I really love playing bass.
Would you sing? Or would you just play instruments?
I would sing if nobody else was going to sing. I really wanted to be in bands, And so if no one else would do it, then I would do it. But I don't think this isn't a false modesty thing. I'm just not, I'm not a professional grade singer or anything.
Yeah.
I just like singing.
Amelia, what about you and singing? I mean, were you like that, I know you were a kid in the 90s, so really your kind of teenage years were more in the 2000s, but were you singing? Were you those tapes that you and your dad bought, were you just belting out the songs?
Definitely. Yeah, that was where I got most of my practice for singing was the radio and in listening to recordings over and over and learning how to mimic and how to recreate the sounds that I was hearing. And I would do a lot of practicing just in the house.
And did you ever, at a certain point when you were a kid, did anybody say, Amelia's got a really good voice, maybe she should get training or join a choir, and did anything like that happen?
I did some choir stuff. I didn't like it as much because when you're singing with other people, not very many people would look at me. But I did do a lot of singing in groups. There's
Yeah.
a winter solstice celebration called the Christmas Revels that still happens in Cambridge, Massachusetts, and I did a lot of that. So a lot of traditional folk singing with a bunch of sweet hippies. And within the context of that, people were kind and complimentary and would ask me to sing with them more. So that helped me understand.
Yeah. Did you did you you mentioned this idea that you didn't love choir because people weren't listening to you. Were you the kind of kid who liked being the center of attention? Were you like in theater and plays and shows?
Definitely. Yes. Yes.
Tell me more about that. Why did you like that? Because a lot of kids are like, no, I do not. Like, I think, Nick, you were probably like that. Like, you probably didn't want to be the center of attention. Am I right?
Definitely less so than I think Amelia, and more the older I get, the less I want to be the center of attention. We have kind of a running joke in our band where I keep joking that I'm gonna keep moving my rig 6 inches further off stage every tour until finally I'm not on stage at all.
It could just be a whole documentary. You could just hire a filmmaker to just do that documentary, and it's just a static shot, and it would just be 6 inches every. It would be the same shot anyway. But back to you, Amelia. Did you? I mean, were you like a theater kid? Were you? Tell me a little bit about what it meant to be the center of the center of attention or a performer.
I think at first, my interest in being in plays and singing was definitely to get as many eyes on me as possible, mostly because that performing has always been the place where I feel the most comfortable and the most alive and the most engaged with the world.
Yeah.
And then it slowly kind of transitioned to create the energetic arc of a performance, to take an audience with me through a story or through a series of happenings, which is kind of how I relate that to Sylvan Esso. Or like when Sylvan Esso does a show, we walk people through the energetic arc of the songs that we're playing, and hopefully lead to some sort of ecstatic sense of living in the moment.
Yeah. What was it? I mean, did you have a band like in high school? I know you were going to get to college, but did you have one that you joined or that you sang with?
I didn't.
No.
I was in a very short-lived Portishead cover band.
Oh, nice.
We had one practice, and it was great.
Were you Beth Gibbons?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So you were singing Sour Times.
Indeed, I was.
Right?
Mm-hmm. It's the best.
So, all right. So you get to college and you start a band. I guess you got this trio, Mountain Man, and it's more. I guess I've heard it described as more sort of folk-like music. Is that fair? A fair description?
I think so. I think you can kind of characterize anything right now as folk music, but Mountain Man particularly was definitely folk music. It's 3-part harmony, very little instruments. Alex plays the guitar, Molly plays the guitar, I would just sing. And they kind of, the songs switched between being madrigals or stunt yodeling songs or kind of Appalachian folk tunes.
I think like the vision in my mind for a band called Mountain Man is like the music from Brother, Where Art Thou?
Mm-hmm.
Like, was it like that?
Kind of, except we talked about sex a lot.
Right.
And like had a lot more, I think Mountain Man was more punk in that we were like really, really 3 really smelly people singing very beautifully, talking about really weird things and kind of interspersing the songs with stand-up comedy.
Yeah. And when you were in college, did you, with Mountain Man, when did it become clear to you that like, this is what you want to pursue? This is what you actually want to do. You want to be a musician, a performer, and this is how you want to like make a living with your life.
Mountain Man had made a MySpace under the encouragement of my friend Alex Bleeker, who's the bassist in the band Real Estate.
Oh wow!
Yeah, and once we made a MySpace,
Nobody knew Real Estate back then, though, right? No.
No.
That's amazing. I love how these things come together. Like people meet and then they become adults
Hmm.
and then like that happens. Anyway, I interrupted you.
Um, Bleecker encouraged me to make a MySpace, and then one of our songs immediately got picked up on Pitchfork, which in that time, I think it was around 2008, 2009, was so wild and amazing to be written up on Pitchfork because I'd grown up reading Pitchfork for my entire high school career. And at that point, once we got mentioned on
Hmm.
Pitchfork, I started getting contacted by mostly booking agents from the UK asking if I wanted to come on tour, if we wanted to bring the band over. And at that point, I was like, oh my gosh, if we are smart about this and we really think about it, we can figure out how to make money doing this thing. And why would I not?
Yeah.
How on earth would I not take that ticket to ride?
Was your family, your parents supportive of that? Or were they like,
No, they were like, that sounds great, go for it. They were really, oh yeah, they were worried about me driving around the country in a car with two other young people. But other than that, they were mostly excited. I think they thought I was probably nuts, but I booked us a tour and by cold calling a lot of different art spaces around the US. And then the week after I graduated college, we were on tour in Europe.
We'll be right back with Nick and Amelia from Sylvan Esso after a quick break. Stay with us. I'm Guy Raz, and you're listening to The Great Creators. Welcome back to The Great Creators. I'm Guy Raz. Let's get back to my conversation with indie pop band Sylvan Esso. Nick, when you were a teenager, did you in your mind think, I'm going to be doing this? Like, you were a musician, you were making music. Did you think that's what you wanted to like pursue with your life?
Oh, yeah, definitely. But weirdly, I never thought I was going to make any money. I didn't think it was ever going to be my job, but I think I knew from very early on that it was the only thing I wanted to do.
Yeah.
So even for the first part of my quote unquote career, I would go on tour with the bands I was in at the time and like lose a bunch of money and then come home and bartend doubles
In Milwaukee.
all week. Yeah. To make up enough money to pay all my bills and then go on tour again. And that was just kind of what I did for like a long years.
Yeah.
The weird part is I would go back to that so happily. I mean, it's just, I think I was lucky enough to be in a position where, I had cheap rent. At that time, it was not expensive to live in Milwaukee. And, there's a bar in every corner in Milwaukee. So I could really easily get a job
Right.
that could sustain kind of that decision.
Yeah.
Without having, I dropped out of college and, like a lot of musicians. And so I was kind of in this perfect situation where I was like, oh, I can have this be the thing my life is based around, even if it's not what I do for a living.
How did you start to move towards electronic music? I mean, you're listening to whatever is being played around you. You're playing the sax. But obviously, even before you met Amelia, you'd already had electronic music projects. So how did you start to shift and make that kind of music?
I had kind of a sea change moment as a teen when a friend of mine played me this band Autiker for the first time.
Autiker?
Yeah, they're a duo from the UK, been around for a very long time. They still play now and they're better than ever. But they're just this very beautiful experimental electronic band that has this very deep cult following. And it just kind of blew my head apart. And I started wondering, it just kind of shifted my focus from, like, before that, I wanted to be really good at saxophone and really good at bass. I wanted to have, chops, and I wanted to feel like I could hang with really good players.
Mm-hmm.
And then after that, something happened where it became, what I was interested became more in the idea and composition and what music was and the choices people were making rather than how good they were at their instrument. And that kind of shifted my whole trajectory. Like I before that, I'd been looking at kind of music schools from a performance angle, or, and after that it shifted and I went all composition and got in the composition department at UW Milwaukee, which is where I went to school before dropping out to be in a band.
Yeah. I mean, the sort of the chance meeting, I guess it's not a chance meeting, but still, kind of a chance meeting between you and Amelia was when Mountain Man was in Milwaukee performing and you opened for them. And it must have been, imagine it must have been a pretty small venue where you guys were all playing.
Yeah, it was this place called the Cactus Club that I actually used to work at. I think the legal capacity is like 82. I mean, it's a small place.
Yeah.
But yeah, I had just started doing solo shows as a way to just get out there, and because before that I had just been I'd always been playing in other people's bands, and I felt like I needed something that was my own, that if it was going to break up, it was because I was stopping it. You know? And not that long after that was when this show happened.
So were you on stage with like a mixer and a laptop, and I mean this was like 2011, like controller panels? I mean, it was just
a
music?
laptop and like a MIDI controller and like a distortion pedal. I mean, it was like nothing, but it was really fun.
Amelia, tell me about when you first met Nick.
Usually when you're playing a 3-band bill in any town, and it's the band that usually the first person who's playing is a close friend of the promoter, so they don't tend
right.
And when they're like a little wiry guy with a foldy table and a laptop and a little MIDI controller, you kind of go like, oh, well, can't win them all. But it was amazing because Nick was good, which is it's rare in general to get to randomly see a piece of music and find yourself liking it when you haven't curated it for yourself. But the fact that watching Nick play then, I could see how much he cared about what he was doing, and also that he really believed in the songs that he had written, and that he was excited to play them, and they were good.
Yeah, I mean, you're playing in a venue of 80 people. The opener, a random person from Milwaukee, like the chances that you would be struck by that music are really slim, right? I mean, let's be honest.
Indeed.
Right? And that happened. And I guess you asked Nick to remix one of your songs, right? Like, you guys met and you liked his music and you thought, hey, can you take this piece of music we're doing and see what you can do with it?
Yeah, it took a couple of months later. We'd become friends on the internet, and I sent him a song to see if he wanted to remix it, and he said yes.
But there was none of this was like, oh, we'll have the intention of working together or putting our music together, our minds together. It was like, let's see what you can do. Yeah.
Right, Sandy?
Yeah, I mean, it was really a one-off. Like, it was just supposed to be this one thing, and then I think I was kind of at loose ends in my life at the time. The band I had been touring with was on their way to stopping touring.
This is Megaphon.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And I kind of just was in this space where I was like tired of being in other people's bands that would break up.
Yeah.
And, I was like getting older-ish. I mean, laughably so now, but that's how it felt then. And and I working on this, I think when I finally cracked the code on how to approach the song that she had sent me, I immediately felt like I had found a way that that my taste and my point of view could be effective and interesting, and that the two of us were saying something new together that we weren't necessarily saying apart. And so I was really on this train of like, hey, this is good. Like, we should keep doing this. Yeah. What if we did more of this? And Amelia was, very busy at the time. Like, Mountain Man was blowing up, and they were singing backup for Feist at the time, who was on the Metals tour. And so,
wow.
It's like she was really busy and everything was working out for her. And I was kind of hanging out, waiting for something to happen. So I definitely was inspired to make something happen.
Tell me about the move to Durham. Both of you guys moved there. I mean, I think, Amelia, you were living in Brooklyn.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, Durham is an amazing place. People don't realize, like, Merge Records is from there, right? You guys probably know Laura and Mac. You probably know
Oh yeah.
them. I've interviewed them. Obviously, Superchunk, legendary. But tell me about Durham and moving there in 2012.
I moved here with the intention of living in Durham for 6 months while we finished the record, the first Sylvan record.
Why did you and did you move there because Nick was there?
Yeah.
Because you wanted to work with him on. By that point, you had decided let's try and do something together.
Indeed, by that point, we had decided that we were going to make a record. I knew that I had just made a day rate singing backup for Feist, and I knew that if I lived anywhere other than Brooklyn, I could live off of that money for a significantly longer period of time.
Smart.
Thank you. And then when I got here, Nick and I realized that the band was going to be very important to us, regardless of the level of success we were going to have. Nick and I quickly realized that the thing we were making was going to be something that we were going to build our lives around. And I met all these wonderful people who I immediately realized I could ask to pick me up at the airport. Like within a weekend, I had 5 friends where I was like, "Oh, I can get picked up from the airport by these people," which is very rare.
Yeah. And how about you, Nick? Why did you move to Durham? I know that I think Megaphon was from Durham, but why?
Well, they're all Wisconsin guys, which is because I met them in Wisconsin,
right?
Way back, and then they all moved to the Triangle, which is what we call this region, borderline at random in 2006 as a band, and so which is a whole other story. But I was kind of in this zone, like I said, where it was, I was looking to make a shift, and all my work was coming from here, and I was coming here 6 months a year anyway. And it just kind of had one of those moments where I was like, I could just go right now and do this. And that was also before the writing became on the wall that band wasn't going to be working the way they were working in the same way anymore. But even still, it was just a great, reason to get out. I had all these friends here. I knew I could get a job and a roommate with a phone call. Even I mean, Amelia said 6 months. I said I'd maybe give it a year.
Right.
And that was, 13 years ago now.
Yeah. By the way, how important was at the time and is Merge Records to kind of in the music scene in Durham? I mean, is it sort of considered to be the focal point, the center in a way?
I mean, to me at least, yeah, I think they're massive. And I think there's a thing coming from a town that doesn't have something like Merge, coming from Milwaukee.
Yeah.
Merge being here meant that there was this kind of template that you could follow. It allowed people to dream about what they could do. And beyond that, there was always people that, even coming here, I knew that there was people who had been through the things that we were going through before us that I could call and ask for advice. And because Merge is here, then there's also this whole ecosystem of people that enable the music industry around them. So there's great music lawyers, and there's management, and there's all these kind of there's distro, there's all these kind of different things that work within that make an ecosystem possible. And at the very least in that way, I think that they are massively influential in establishing this entire area as a hotbed of working musicians. I mean, the sheer amount of talent here is way higher than it should be per capita than anywhere else.
Yeah.
I mean, it's bananas.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of that is owed to Merge. I think a lot of that's owed to Yep Rock. I think a lot of that's owed to Little Brother, and Ninth Wonder. Oh, and J. Cole. I mean, there's just all these kind of foundational musical people that laid the groundwork for all this. That I don't think people talk enough about how those things existing create the architecture on which other people can hang their own hopes and dreams. You know?
It's so cool. It's so true. I've been to their office in Durham, Merge's office, and it's super cool just to see that, as you say, that ecosystem. Amelia, when you guys, so you get to Durham and you start making music together, right? You and Nick, and you'd come off tour singing backup for Feist. You had Mountain Man. Tell me a little bit about how you started to kind of marry your styles? I mean, Nick was obviously an electronic musician. You were coming from a folk tradition. How did you start to get the square to fit in the circle? It's a terrible analogy, but what do you remember about the process?
Pop music in general was one of my first loves. So
Yeah.
and pop finds so much of its traditions from folk music, repetition, chorus, fun sounds that aren't actually words, but that make you want to sing them again. There's all of those elements are there. So it's actually quite easy. All I had to do was just listen to what Nick was making and then respond. One can only ever be themselves, no matter what you do. So it was quite easy to figure out a way to authentically respond to what Nick was doing. There was some fear. I would get like a little scared that maybe what I was doing wasn't that good.
Hmm.
But it's like that with any new thing that you start doing. And pretty quickly I figured out that we could play make believe together and make songs and that we were gonna like them.
Did you see initially Sylvan Esso, this band that you guys put together, as just a project, like a one-off project?
I did, but I think like pretty quickly, like after we'd written one or two songs, I think we both knew that it probably wasn't going to be a one-off project. Is that right, Sandy? Do you think that's true?
I mean, I think for me, finding "Hey Mami," I think, which is the first song on our first record, was a really kind of foundational moment, because I think it kind of cracked a code in the way that the two of us could work within pop and with each other. It didn't feel like we were putting a costume on.
Yeah.
It felt like we were revealing something. And that, I think that feeling is always, the older we get, I think still the thing that we're chasing is like that feeling of revealing something new within yourself, or like being seen more clearly. I think that was kind of the first moment of that for me, was finding the way that song could work and the way we fit together in this unique way that kind of said like, oh, I'm going to do this as long as we both want to do this.
Stay with us. We'll have more with Sylvan Esso right after this break. I'm Guy Raz, and you're listening to The Great Creators. Welcome back to The Great Creators. I'm Guy Raz. Here's more of my conversation with electro-pop duo Sylvan Esso. When your debut record came out in 2014, 39 on the Billboard 200, right? Because Hey Mami was called the #1 song of the year by Paste. I think within a couple of months you were on The Tonight Show performing Coffee. Tell me about the response to that record. Was it beyond what you imagined, or were you like, we made an amazing album, this is going to be huge?
I think it was definitely beyond what I had imagined. It was really exciting. And also, Nick and I had kind of talked about what we were going to do if it was really successful. So we had some ground plans, but they were all kind of daydreamy and fictional. So doing the real thing was pretty wild.
Yeah. Also, I think every time you make a record, hopefully you think it's great and that people are going to love it, you know?
Yeah.
So like, I think I was really used to feeling like, oh, we made this great thing that people are going to love. I think the wild part was, for me at least, it was the first time I felt like traction on anything. And so I remember putting out, Play It Right, and then Hey Mami, and then whatever was after that, Coffee, I think, and feeling the traction of it, like feeling people that I don't know caring about it and like getting excited. And like, we did like a run up the East Coast when we had a 12-inch single out. We had like 2 songs on the internet, and we did like 4 shows up to New York and back. And they were all like sold out. And I just remember feeling like I've never felt this before. This is a unique sensation.
I remember there was also there was a mystery around this band. At least for me, I think a lot of people was Sylvan Esso a person? I thought of Esso like the gas stations that you see in Europe, And I was like, is this a French band? I wasn't sure. There was this mystery around everything to do that. And I don't know if that was intentional or not, but it was definitely real.
Thanks. I think it was because of the time also.
Yeah.
Like we
Also, we were really protective. I think that it felt really special to us, and like our connection felt really special to us. And so we didn't want too much of that to be out there. We thought the music kind of spoke for itself, and we kind of came up with that logo and the idea that this might be kind of just like a feeling of like an image and a brand and a sound that could kind of exist in its own sphere.
Tell me a little bit about how you guys write together. I mean, obviously you're partners in life and in professionally, so you are around each other a lot. How do you start? Like, can you kind of break down the process, what both of you do? And it may be different every time, but is there sort of a general approach you take?
right now we'll get in the studio and Nick will like start improvising and then I'll respond to what he's doing. Or I'll have written something in the air and then we'll come in and record it. And then we'll make the arrangement around whatever. Those are the two main ways. Are there other ways?
I mean, it's just kind of, it's all direction. It's always been all directions, like sometimes we'll get excited about like a voice memo one of us took somewhere, and like that needs to be something. Or like just the other day I got this fretless bass that's sitting over here, and the first thing that came out of it was this really specific kind of like Walk on the Wild Side type bass line. And we like, in 15 minutes had an entire song out of that. And so it just kind of, it's anything from like a literal just sound that like the dog made or something, all the way up to like Amelia writing a complete song. So there's, I think in order for it to be good, we kind of have to do it a little different each time.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think we need to keep feeling like we're surprising each other.
Amelia, you mentioned something about earlier about how words, you loved being able to sing because just the sound of words, right? Or just sounds that you could make that are meaningless, right? It's just a sound that becomes a line in a song, right? When you are, you talked about this idea of like writing something in the air, right? And I imagine what you mean by that is it's just out there. It's just in the air, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so do you think about, when you think about words, and maybe it's different every time, but do you think about the meaning of the word or how the word sounds, when it's connecting with the music?
Usually I'm thinking about, I write lyrics and melody at the same time. And that means that I'm kind of feeling around in the muck for the words that make me feel something. It feels so similar to fishing, of like trying to find something that feels a little electric, and then I'll be like, "Ooh, okay, I have some feeling around this. This word. I'll dig a little deeper through that path and see like where is the electricity through like." I'll write like 4 sentences and be like, "Ooh, this fourth one feels good and right," and then I'll take part of that and be like, "Ooh, this, if I loop it or if I say it 3 times in a syncopated way, it makes you want to hear it again." So it's very intuitive and labyrinthian.
Are you in the studio? I know you're in the studio now, but what's your process in terms of just making stuff? Are you always going there at least a few times a week, just recording stuff that will probably never end up on a record? But is that how you make your music?
Right now in this moment, we come here every weekday and kind of do it like work. It's a very unrigorous work week, but we do like to come to the studio together and work together in the same room for a couple hours a day. And we found that if we do that, songs just appear at this point.
Yeah, there's definitely times where we're not as strict, and then we'll be like, all right, well, this time we're going to be more strict about it, and we'll be there. And also there's just so many other things happening here. We both work on a ton of other projects, so we're here a lot not working on our band, and then we kind of dedicate time to it, which feels, right now it's feeling really good.
And is there sometimes writers will say I have to write 3,000 words a day or 1,000 words a day, even though none of it will appear in the book. Do you ever kind of do anything like that? Do you have like a goal, like, okay, we're gonna just churn out X number of, whatever a day?
I like to get 2 verses and a chorus a day.
Wow.
That feels nice. I don't do it that often, but I like to think it.
That's not true.
Thank you.
Amelia's amazing at it. I can't do that.
Yes,
Amelia
you can.
Amelia can just go for
You
it.
can make like
It's crazy.
stacks on stacks of beats. I've seen your folders.
Well, it's interesting because you now, you moved to Durham, the home of Merge Records, and now you guys have your own label. You created your own label. Tell me about the label. Is it just for Sylvan Esso music, or are you also producing or releasing work for other artists?
Well, yeah, we release the work of many other artists. Sandy, you were just talking about it recently. You want to give the spiel? You're great at the spiel.
The spiel?
Yeah, spiel.
Yeah, it's mostly other artists. One of our biggest artists right now is this guy, Tim Bernardes, who's from Sao Paulo, who is this amazing guitar player and singer who plays in the band Oterno, who we just re-released their first record. It's kind of all over the place, though. We've had, this year, we've had Reina Tropical. We put out her debut album. We've put out this Brazilian jazz record by this guy, Amaro Freitas, pianist. So it's very wide-ranging, kind of all over the place. Like, so we do stuff that we make here. Most of me and Amelia's other projects tend to come out on the label, but then the roster's really diverse and I think really interesting. So it's always kind of, it's a big experiment, and right now it's feeling very good.
Yeah. I know you guys are going to be headlining a festival in Phoenix in March. And this year you were celebrating the 10th anniversary of your debut record. And I think a lot happened because the rights reverted back to you. Like when you make a record, the rights are owned by the label initially. When you reflect back on now 10 years of that album and all you've done since then, you've released, I think, 4 studio albums total, maybe 4, I think, total. What do you imagine Sylvan Esso will be or will sort of make in 5 or 10 years from now? Like when we're talking about 20 years since your debut, what kind of work do you guys want to do?
Who knows? I don't know. Right now we're working on our 5th record, and it keeps on being very surprising. We have yet to get together to make to make songs without being surprised. Mm-hmm. So I'm not sure.
Yeah.
Hopefully we'll still be able to be making music and not riding bicycles to purify our water.
That's the dream.
Nice. Nick, any thoughts?
I think the band continues to justify its own existence.
Yeah.
Which is, every time it's kind of a surprise to me. But in the end, I think the music we make is kind of just a byproduct of like our personal relationship, which is always shifting and changing and growing and getting deeper and stranger. And in that way, I can't imagine we would ever stop doing this, or the band itself would ever stop changing.
Yeah. Nick, Amelia of Sylvan Esso, thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
That's Amelia Meath and Nick Sanborn from Sylvan Esso. You can find links to their music at our show notes page at thegreatcreators.com/Sylvan Esso. And if you want to hear more interviews with musicians like Jeff Tweedy of Wilco and Ben Gibbard of Death Cab for Cutie, just scroll down in your podcast feed or visit thegreatcreators.com/episodes.
Thanks so much for listening to our show this week. If you enjoyed it, please make sure to hit the follow button on your podcast app so you never miss a new episode. This episode was produced and edited by Kevin Leahy. Thanks also to Malia Agudelo and Kayla Rosenbaum. I'm Guy Raz, and you've been listening to The Great Creators from Built It Productions.